Meta description. What if fame isn't as beautiful as it looks? What if behind the applause, there is a silence no one hears? Stay with us until the end, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as we uncover a truth that might change how you see fame forever. What if the life everyone dreams of is the very life someone else is quietly struggling to endure? What if the spotlight that seems so warm from a distance slowly turns into something blinding, something isolating, something that no one prepares you for? Before you scroll any further, ask yourself this: when fame reaches its peak, does happiness always follow, or does something else begin to take its place? The world has always been fascinated by fame. It is seen as the ultimate validation, a symbol of success that transcends borders and languages. To be known, to be admired, to be followed by millions, these are things many aspire to achieve. And yet, behind this universal desire lies a reality that is rarely explored with the same intensity as the dream itself. Because when fame becomes constant, when it becomes the environment rather than the achievement, it begins to change the way a person exists. For someone like Jungkook, fame is not a temporary experience. It is a permanent condition, a defining aspect of daily life that shapes every decision, every interaction, every moment of visibility. It is not something that can be turned off at the end of the day. It follows, it lingers, it becomes part of the air one breathes. First, fame can feel empowering. It opens doors, creates opportunities, and builds connections that would otherwise be impossible. It amplifies talent, turning passion into global influence. For Jungkook, this transformation happened at a young age, at a time when most people are still figuring out who they are. Instead of exploring identity in private, he was doing it in front of millions, with every step observed, every change noticed. But what happens when the applause fades, even if only for a moment? What happens in the silence that follows the noise? This is where the narrative begins to shift. Because fame is often associated with constant excitement, constant validation, constant movement. But between those moments, there is stillness. And in that stillness, there is space. Space to think, to reflect, to feel. And sometimes, that space can feel overwhelming. The silent burden of fame is not something that can be easily explained. It is not always dramatic, not always visible, not always acknowledged. It exists in the background, shaping experiences in subtle ways. It is the awareness of being watched, even when no one is physically present. It is the understanding that privacy is limited, that personal moments are no longer entirely personal. For Jungkook, this means navigating a world where the line between public and private is constantly shifting. A simple action can become a topic of discussion. A casual moment can be turned into a headline. Over time, this creates a heightened sense of awareness, a carefulness that becomes second nature, and yet, despite this constant awareness, there is also expectation. The expectation to perform, to connect, to maintain a certain image. It is not just about doing well. It is about doing well consistently. It is about meeting a standard that is not static, but constantly evolving. This is where the weight begins to accumulate. Not all at once, but gradually. Each expectation adds a layer. Each performance adds responsibility. Each moment of visibility adds pressure. And while none of these elements are inherently negative, together they create a reality that is far more complex than the surface suggests. There is also the emotional dimension, the part that is often the most difficult to articulate. Emotions do not disappear in the presence of fame. They become more intricate. Joy is amplified, but so is pressure. Pride is present, but so is the awareness of expectation. Moments of doubt may arise, but they are often navigated quietly, without the space to fully express them. Jungkook has, at times, allowed glimpses of this reality to surface. Not in a way that disrupts the image, but in subtle, almost fleeting ways. A thoughtful pause, a reflective comment, a moment of honesty that feels slightly more personal than usual. These moments may pass quickly, but they are significant. They remind us that behind the image is a person experiencing a reality that cannot always be fully shared. The idea that fame can become a silent burden is not a contradiction. It is a coexistence. It is possible to be grateful for opportunities and still feel the weight of responsibility. It is possible to love what you do and still feel overwhelmed at times. These experiences do not cancel each other out. They exist together, shaping a more complete picture. Another aspect that often goes unnoticed is the impact of constant visibility on identity. When a person is seen by millions, their identity can become partially defined by how they are perceived. This does not erase individuality, but it does influence how it is expressed. Choices are made with awareness, actions are taken with consideration, and over time, this can create a subtle tension between who someone is and how they are seen. For Jungkook, this tension is part of his reality. He is both an individual and a symbol, both a person and a representation. Navigating these dual roles requires a level of adaptability that goes beyond what most people experience. It requires balance, awareness, and a constant negotiation between authenticity and expectation. And then there is the question that lingers beneath everything else. What does it mean to rest? Rest, in its simplest form, is a pause, a moment of recovery. But in the context of fame, rest is not always straightforward. Stepping away does not mean disappearing. Even in absence, presence can be felt. Conversations continue, attention remains, expectations do not fully pause. This creates a unique dynamic where rest becomes something that must be actively protected, rather than naturally occurring. It becomes a conscious effort, a deliberate choice in an environment that does not always allow for complete stillness. Despite all of this, Jungkook continues to move forward. He continues to create, to perform, to connect. His dedication is evident, his passion undeniable. This persistence is often celebrated, and rightly so. But it also raises another question. What sustains that persistence? Is it love for the craft? Is it responsibility to the fans? Is it a personal drive to grow and improve? Or is it a combination of all these factors, intertwined in a way that makes it impossible to separate one from another? The answer may not be simple, and perhaps it does not need to be. What matters is the recognition that behind the visible success is an invisible effort, a continuous process of adaptation, resilience, and navigation as this story unfolds. It becomes clear that the silent burden of fame is not something that diminishes the value of success. Instead, it adds depth to it. It reminds us that every achievement is accompanied by experiences that are not always visible, that every moment of recognition is part of a larger, more complex journey, and so, the question returns, not as a conclusion, but as an invitation. If fame can become a silent burden, how do we redefine what it means to truly succeed? If this made you think, if it changed the way you see the world behind the spotlight, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts, leave a comment, and be part of a conversation that goes beyond the surface. Because sometimes, the most important stories are not the ones we celebrate, but the ones we are willing to understand. And as this realization begins to settle, another question slowly rises, quieter but far more unsettling. What happens when someone becomes so deeply connected to the world that they begin to lose the space to connect with themselves? Because the story of Jungkook is not only about fame as an external force, but about how that force gradually reshapes the inner world in ways that are rarely visible, rarely discussed, and often misunderstood. There is a difference between being known and being understood, and in the case of global figures like Jungkook, that difference becomes vast. Millions recognize his face, his voice, his presence. They celebrate his achievements, follow his journey, and feel emotionally connected to him. But understanding requires something deeper, something that goes beyond observation. It requires space, context, and a willingness to see complexity rather than certainty. And complexity is where the silent burden grows heavier. Because within that complexity lies a constant negotiation between expression and restraint. Every public figure learns, over time, that not everything can be shared. Not every thought can be spoken. Not every feeling can be revealed. This is not necessarily imposed. It becomes an instinct, a form of self-protection shaped by experience. When every